Good evening, Browns fans, and welcome to another edition of OBR Weekly. My name's Barry. I am using the wrong mic, and I will certainly figure that out here in a minute. But he is Fred. He is the legend, and he brings his knowledge here to bear. How you doing, Fred?
Doing good, Mike. Oh, you're Barry, not Mike. Okay. I'm glad to see you back after a week off.
Yeah, exactly.
Taking vacations.
Exactly. I have now changed my mic, and I'm hopeful that it's working. So let's get on with the show here. If you are watching via the YouTube or Twitch chat rooms, just be aware that we desperately need your input and your feedback during the show. I've got about 15 minutes worth of stuff to talk about, and then after that, we're winging it. And we're winging it based on your questions and your comments. You guys really drive the show. So let's please hear them in the chat rooms, and we'll get rocking and rolling. In the meantime, Fred, we had a little bit of a false alarm today about Dak Prescott. There were some rumors out there for people who were not stuffing their helmet with better stuff, heard them, and quickly ran to Twitter and ran to ask the insiders to try to find out if there was anything to him. And it turns out there wasn't. From Dallas, the reporter Jane Slater relays that there's nothing going on from there. And if, of course, you've been tuned in to the OBR premium forums, you know that there has been nothing going on from the Brown side. So if there are talks, it's between Jimmy and Jerry or something. I don't know. Fred, are you disappointed in finding out that there's nothing to these talks?
Well, I mean, it's that would be an understatement. This has been a very disappointing offseason so far to me. Uninspiring. I wrote about it. You need something to talk about. You need something that's exciting, and you keep waiting for the big, the big reveal or whatever, but there's been no there. It's, you keep feeling like there's something like this going to happen, but so far, I mean, you got to be happy with Tevin Jenkins, I guess.
Well, we had some other rumors. We'll go through those a little bit later here, but yeah, somebody's cranking the Jack in the Box box handle, and the Jack never pops out. I mean, there's just nothing exciting happening, from the Browns' perspective. But there are a lot of rumors going around, and one of those got passed around today, and undoubtedly put the kibosh on it real quick. But I feel bad for the broadcaster who put it out there. We had a story wrong about 10 years ago, and I still shudder about it, and it's difficult to deal with. But fortunately, we've been right since then. And
I used to be on his weekly show, and he's a legend, Hall of Fame broadcaster. I don't know how connected he is anymore, but it seems to be plausible. He had the same thing with a Cavs coach. He said that he had resigned, and lo and behold, an hour later, the guy was doing a press conference, just answering questions from the media before a game. The guy ended up getting fired, but yeah, that's the one thing in this business, you get, I've always been very gun shy, to put something out there, especially if you're not 100% sure. I mean, you can rely on people, but sometimes you got to also see what their motives are. I mean, what would be the motive of someone to tell somebody something like that?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
That's what happens.
There's some cross-checking you can do as well. One interesting nugget is that Dak has a no trade clause, at least according to what I read. So that would sort of end that discussion pretty quickly, unless he really enjoys the city of Cleveland and enjoys some Mabel's barbecue and whatnot. But if Dak Prescott was available, would you give away your first round draft pick to get him, Fred?
I probably would. Just not that I think he's the greatest, but there was Mike Mayock talked yesterday about the Browns should explore Derek Carr. If you follow my projections, that was one of my early ones, the second one, I think, because I felt of all the guys that might be available with a new coach coming into the Saints, Derek Carr, he's only 33. He's always played well against the Browns, and he's not a superstar. But last year he got injured, missed the last 6 games, I think, or 7 games. But if you look at his stats, he would have ranked 10th in the NFL in passer rating, if he would have qualified. So he said, Mike Mayock, and this is a former general manager, I think, of the Raiders, so I would think he'd know the rules. He said that the Browns should explore because it would be like a Kirk Cousins situation. You can pick up only $1.255 million of his salary, and the Saints would carry the rest. The big question, would the Saints be willing to make that trade? You could make some scenarios. If they really like Sanders, assuming Ward went to the Titans, maybe you could trade Carr even up, for the pick. But I don't think you'd have to get that much. It's a big salary. But as Mayock pointed out, this year is $1.2 million. Next year it's $40 million, but it's not guaranteed. So if you didn't need him, you could move on. I checked with Jack Duffin because I thought when they restructured his contract, the trade would make it cost prohibitive because of dead cap for the Saints. According to Jack, it's like $60 million. And when I looked on the site, it was somewhere like that. But after June 1st, it dropped down. The thing is I don't know, same way with Kirk Cousins, do you want to wait that long into June? I know it's still a month or 2 before training camp, but anyway, it gives you something to talk about because that's what I was expecting and why that didn't. It came out of left field with Prescott because that isn't a name I was expecting. But that's kind of what I've been expecting is some type of move like that up the sleeve, whether it be Cousins, Carr, Prescott, somebody that you could pry loose to solve the problem so you don't go into the draft with no veteran clear-cut starter and not even sure you want to draft a guy, at the top of the draft to be your starter. So, that's why I'm still kind of befuddled about what's going on here. I realize you got to have opportunities, and we don't know what they've tried to do, but it's sure nothing I've seen or heard would be if I'm sitting in Myles Garrett's shoes and he presented it and he felt like he had a good idea. I don't know if I'd be that impressed. He might have just said that because he had just signed the big contract, but yeah, so we'll see. We'll see what happens from here. But yeah, I mean, I think that would raise the level of play for sure. And going back to what I said, that seems to be Andrew Berry's wheelhouse. And I think clearly the problem with Prescott is not. It's that Jerry Jones, these guys don't want to pay him. They got into that big contract, and Browns are able to figure out and with Jimmy Haslam take care of the financials. So that's where if you could solve somebody else's financial problem, but yeah, it's hard for me to believe that they would do that without an answer in place unless they wanted Shedeur Sanders or something, and that was the part of the plan.
Right. Fred, I am anticipating them coming out of the day one of the draft potentially without a quarterback. And I can hear the talk shows already, going absolutely crazy because they didn't answer their quarterback issues on day one. I suspect that there's going to be a deal over draft weekend. That would be my guess to fill that void. But there's going to be some freakouts in the interim unless they draft one of the 2 top quarterbacks on day one. It's going to be interesting. And one of those quarterbacks had a private workout with the Browns. That's Miami quarterback Cam Ward. This is from good sources that the Cleveland Browns management watched Ward work out. They spent time with him. Ward, of course, had his pro day last week or earlier this week, and the Titans were there in force, Fred. The Titans were making a very, very big show about how much they love Cam Ward. And the Browns, in the meantime, only sent Glenn Cook and one other person, and they got criticized. They got criticized for it, via the usual channels. But let's assume for a second that the Titans are earnest in their love for Cam Ward. How much would you be willing to give up to go up and get that number 1 pick and get him, Fred? I'm sure you've heard the rumors. Titans are asking a lot.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you can take it with a grain of salt. I mean, you gave up 3 first-round picks for Deshaun Watson.
Mm-hmm.
So I would hope he'd be worth more than that. Now, it did set you back. You don't have to pay this guy nearly. I think a rookie quarterback, is kind of in a salary situation where they're under your control for 5 years. I don't know. It depends on how good he is. It depends on if you think he's like a 10 and out of 10, and the next guy, whether it be Sanders or Dart, is like a 6 or a 5 or whatever, and you feel like you got to solve the problem. I've said all along, I wanted him to solve the problem in free agency, whether in a trade or free agency, so you weren't held under the gun. Because clearly, unless you think he's Joe Burrow or Andrew Luck or something, I doubt if 3 first-round picks, is worth going one spot. But you got to solve the quarterback position. And if they're not sure anybody else is, I don't like the idea of trading down and then use the ammunition and go up and get your guy. That never works. Somebody swoops in ahead of you and gets him, and then you're going, oh, doggone it. You're one spot away. If you're convinced Cam Ward is the guy, you can make the argument, why not go all in and do whatever to make sure you get him and solve the problem. But if you're like, well, we like him, but we're not sure he is the answer completely, and we might not like the other guys as much, but we like them, that's another story. So, I'd be happy. I'd like to have Abdul Carter. I'd like to have Travis Hunter. But Cam Ward, to me, is the quarterback to get. I mean, he checks the boxes to me. I don't know what they think about Shedeur Sanders, but I like what I've seen of Ward and more his demeanor and his upside and all that kind of stuff. So, you feel like, unfortunately for the Browns, they're in a 1 quarterback draft and they're number 2. And, and for people say, well, wait until 26. What do you want? Another 2 and 15 year, 3 and 14, and then hope you're the number 1 pick? Because if you're not the number 1 pick, you're not going to have the chance to get the best guy. I don't care if you're 2 again, even if there's more quarterbacks, the best one is who everybody's going to try to get,
Yep.
And it's right now, if the Titans said, we'll put an auction, you'd probably have 4, 5, 6 teams bid to try to get Ward. That's why 12, 13 teams bid on Deshaun Watson back when he was on the block. It's just either have a quarterback or you don't. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like you don't want to take one at 2 just to take one, but you got to solve this problem. And now you go into the draft with Carson Wentz or Joe Flacco as your starting quarterback, or Kenny Pickett. My goodness, does that get you excited? No. And
it doesn't sell
that's where you wanted to have this already solved. And obviously Wilson didn't want to come here, or they didn't want him bad enough. And Rodgers, they haven't even talked to. He's the only starting quarterback. You want him to go to the Steelers? So you're sitting there in the musical chair game. He would be the only one left that is a bona fide starter, and you're going to be the team without one.
Right.
That's what
right.
I feel like right now.
Well, that's where it seems to be headed. But there's the Giants. We'll get to this here in a second when we talk about Russ Wilson. Let's just flip over to that slide. He signed with the Giants. The Giants already had Jameis Winston and one other guy. I forget who else is over there in New York.
DeVito,
yeah, Tommy DeVito. So, they sort of got tired of waiting for Aaron Rodgers to make up his mind. He said, forget that show, and signed Russell Wilson to a $10 million deal worth potentially as much as $20 million. Seems like kind of a panic move by the Giants. They now have a full quarterback room, Fred, and the draft is still coming. And if they liked Shedeur Sanders, they were in a prime spot to get him.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. Kind of like you want to know that you have some security there. I mean, frankly, I would take either of those quarterbacks. I'm in the minority. I would have taken Jameis Winston compared to what you got now, and Wilson was like, okay, I'm not excited about any of them, but he's a legitimate starting quarterback. I mean, right now you feel like, I think I wrote this in the free agency reset today on offense, is that I kind of did the Pickett thing as he's battling for backup or third string, kind of like DTR. But I think I put in there, he now legitimately, the Browns probably weren't giving him a line saying he's going to have a chance to battle for the. I thought that's just a line, but it's now looking like, even if now with the guys there, if you don't trade from somebody and you just sign somebody like Carson Wentz, Joe Flacco, and a rookie, you legitimately can argue that Pickett would be in the mix to be the starter. You know, in fact, you'd rather have him probably than Wentz or Flacco at this point. So it's not an enviable position in my opinion right now. You're kind of, like you said, very well. And I think now Kirk Cousins, even Derek Carr, they're going to wait, and they have no trade clauses. Even if the Saints said, we like one of these quarterbacks and we're going to take one. I don't think Carr, or especially Cousins, wants to go to a team that has a starter or is going to draft a starter. And now with all the musical chairs being filled, the only opening would be the Browns or the Steelers. If Rodgers turns down the Steelers offer and retires or whatever, or he ends up still going to Minnesota. So now you're going to have to play a waiting game, like you said. It's going to be probably after the draft before there's any movement. I still think your best shot is prying away Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr if it was feasible, but Kirk Cousins, because I don't care if the Falcons win out because they have to get something in return. You're pretty desperate at this point. If you got to give up a 5th round pick or something like that, what good's that going to do you anyway? You're going to probably draft, Siaki Ika, who you took in the 3rd round. So, you got to get a quarterback. And I still think that with no clear-cut quarterback at 2, if you got Cousins, then you can get Carter or Hunter and have a clear conscience, And this is also my pet peeve. Everybody says the Giants wanted Shedeur Sanders. The last I checked, they were the 3rd pick in the draft. Why is
Right.
he good enough to be the franchise quarterback for the New York Giants at 3, but the Browns can't take him at 2? That's too high to take him, where 3 is not. That's okay. That, it makes no sense to me. So,
Yeah.
there's more questions than answers. We still don't know really where the Browns think. All this talk, and it might be from day one, it's like we're going to take whoever the Titans don't at quarterback,
Right. Yeah.
and then we'll go, oh, okay.
That sort of gets us to the next slide about Shedeur Sanders. His quote unquote drop continues, if you believe mock drafts and the various pundits that are out there and so on and so forth. And, I wrote about it today in the Daily Bloviation that it always seems to me, Fred, like there's all these stories of, about a player or two rising or falling dramatically and all that. Once we get around to the draft, it turns out to be pretty much like we thought it would be at the beginning of the combine. It's like all this noise leads absolutely nowhere. And if that's the case, Shedeur Sanders goes in the top 5. And that still would not surprise me. Do you think that he'll go in the top 10, if you had to guess?
I do. I mean, I've been doing this. I mean, now it was the Browns, but they traded up to get Johnny Manziel, in that one draft. And teams as a whole just value quarterbacks and are desperate to get them. You got the Saints at 9, I think, and the Jets at 7. I don't think by any stretch they think Justin Fields is the long-term answer.
Right.
And the Saints were wavering on Carr. That's why I thought he could still maybe be available if they draft a quarterback. So I do think that Sanders will go, or Dart, whoever another team likes. Somebody will try to get a quarterback. They just don't slide. I don't know. As far as the stories, there's thousands and thousands of publications and writers that all have to write stories every day. And it's kind of like one writes something that if he has a name or he speaks in a video, then somebody writes a story. And next thing you know, it's stock is falling. Oh,
Yeah.
It is? Okay. Yeah, his stock is falling. And everybody looks at everybody else's mock drafts and say, oh, they have him down there. I'll go down there. I don't want to look stupid. And I think that has a lot to do with it. It would be nice if you could ever, sometimes you get these former GMs that are talking, but they're out of the loop now as far as seeing the draft boards. It's just interesting to see. It'd be like you get the idea that like the Browns, other teams all rank everybody independently and don't listen to what anybody else has to say, and how different it is. I don't know.
Right. Well, yeah, you do have a lot of groupthink that goes on, during this time of year as one mock drafter sees another. And I used to run this thing called the Mock Draft Muncher, where I put all this information into a database for whatever reason. And, just watched, the curves, rise and fall. And then you take the output of that and it's more accurate in February than it is in April, right? Because the initial guesses of what was going to happen going into the combine before all this noise turned out to be more accurate.
Yeah, it's the silly season for a reason, is because nobody wants really any truth to be out there, because they want their guys to be there when they draft, and sometimes it's put out other places to maybe try to get people to shake. It's like the Titans right now. Okay, they're almost going out of their way with the Cam Ward stuff. I mean, I read they sent their whole, like the Browns have their own in-house radio and TV and all that, and that the Titans sent their film crew down there, their broadcasters, I think from the owner on down, they all were
Right.
like rolling out the red carpet and then saying, we're still going to have a private workout. Now they put out, okay, they're going to take the guy, but make a bid to us. And if somebody said, we'll give you 3 first-round picks and, say they like Shedeur Sanders just about the same.
Mm-hmm.
And they get all that, and then they get Sanders, or whoever else that, Jackson Dart or whoever it might be. So, you look at the moves, it sure indicates, though, that they're not bluffing. I mean, I feel bad because they took Tim Boyle off the board today, I can't be mean because he's an NFL quarterback, but when that went out, I said, oh no, there goes Boyle off the board. It's like that just shows you what's needed quarterback. I mean, I remember he started a game against the Browns for the Lions a few years ago, and I think the Browns won 7-6, and it was like, good night. I don't know how guys like that are still in the NFL.
Yep. Yeah. Well,
but if you get Tim Boyle,
signings,
it kind of tells you they're not worried about getting another quarterback other than in the draft.
Yeah, exactly. So, who knows what's going to happen, but I can tell you there's still rumors flying around, and here's one of them. Brandon Aiyuk from the San Francisco 49ers. Little bit of a disenchanted player that they were considering getting rid of last year. And if you believe these rumors, they are still trying to get rid of Brandon Aiyuk, and the Browns are still interested. So there's all kinds of rumors out there around that, keeping things interesting. The name Wyatt Teller has come up in these rumors that they would exchange Teller for the wide receiver and maybe some day 3 draft compensation in there somewhere. But as noted in the chat, and I'm going to put this up on the screen here, there are additional rumors that are even less plausible at this point, that Brock Purdy is in the conversation as well as Brandon Aiyuk. These are not coming from Adam Schefter. These are not coming from Tom Pelissero. These are coming from God knows where. But at least it's something to talk about, and Brock Purdy is a name that's been thrown out there. Could you see a Brock Purdy being successful in a Kevin Stefanski offense, Fred?
Well, yeah, but why in the world? We've been talking this whole time about getting a quarterback, and they finally lucked into getting one in the 7th round. Why would they trade the guy?
I was trying to figure that out.
Unless they're going to sign Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. It seems like they're going through a reboot in San Francisco. I mean, they're dealing with everybody.
The Aiyuk makes sense to me because of the connection. I believe he's got a $22 or $23 million bonus due like April 1st or something, like next week. So we would know soon. But these are the type of moves that Andrew Berry's pretty good at. The Jerry Jeudy, Amari Cooper, even Elijah Moore. 3 years in a row, he traded for a wide receiver. I expected him. Now, he traded for Pickett, but I expected a trade somewhere to get last year, his biggest move was that trade for Jerry Jeudy because, again, Andrew Berry's good at identifying players that are already established in the NFL, and all you got to do is figure out how to pay them. And he's good at that. And so that makes sense to me. If you've identified him as good enough teammate, that he wouldn't mess things up. I don't know anything about him. But Jerry Jeudy, was a really good home run last year. And if you could do that with Aiyuk, obviously you still don't have a quarterback. But the Steelers did it with Metcalf. They were rumored to be in on Aiyuk last year, I believe, too. They've now with Metcalf, they would be off the table. So I don't know how many other suitors there would be. I would assume they'd want to trade him to the NFC or to the AFC. The Browns can absorb some salary. a restructure, whatever. So it makes sense to me. I don't buy the Brock Purdy, unless they get an Aaron Rodgers 41, if they felt like that's what they wanted to do. But I mean, when you draft a guy in the 7th round, and he does what he does, that's kind of like hitting the lottery. I don't know why you'd want to trade him.
Yeah, exactly. Why are you going to give that lottery take it away? Well, I tell you what, people, we've got a whole bunch of people in the YouTube chat room, Twitch chat room, a little bit less populated right now, but we need questions from you guys. I got like 5 of them marked here. Come on, man. Give them up. Give up the questions and comments that Fred and I can riff on. In the meantime, I think it's well known now that I have made a comeback here on this show within a week. And as World's Fastest Fat Man points out, it's all due to Core Home Fitness. Not that I'm down there lifting weights all the time, but, just having it in the house made me feel better. And Core Home Fitness makes the best at-home gym equipment. They make the best adjustable dumbbells on the market, according to everyone who matters in this particular area. They also make the incline benches. They make the racks. They make all the good stuff that you need at corehomefitness.com. They also, if you go to their website, they've got a ton of videos up there now that you can subscribe to, or some of them are free, some of them are behind a paywall, that sort of thing. But you can go there and see how the equipment is used, see how to get healthy, and those will really, really help you out if you decide to go to corehomefitness.com. We hope you do. Thank you to Core Home Fitness for sponsoring the program, for sponsoring the Newswire. You guys rock. And again, thank you very much to corehomefitness.com. All right. So the comments are filling up a bit, but not a lot of questions in there. Hey, we got one from Kelly Black. Fantastic. So keep them coming. Fred and I will monitor them, and Fred and I will talk about them. But first, Fred, you wrote a free agency reset today that was on the front page of the OBR, recapping what the Browns have done so far. So I haven't asked you this question tonight. We've been talking quarterbacks all night. And let me ask you straight up, Kirk Cousins or Carson Wentz? I can't believe we're talking about this in late March, but we're talking
I
about
wouldn't even hesitate. I mean, Kirk Cousins, I think, is a much better quarterback, more established, has run Kevin Stefanski's offense to perfection, in 2 years they were together in Minnesota. I mean, his numbers were phenomenal those years. And he wasn't running that offense in Atlanta. He got injured in those last 6 games. Before he was injured, he had like 17 touchdowns and 7 interceptions, and they were 6-3. So, he's 36. You got at least 2 years. Mm-hmm. But if he did falter, if you draft or you have somebody to step in, you could truly develop somebody. And this is where you're not forced to draft somebody to start immediately. So, no, I mean, Carson Wentz, is kind of like Deshaun Watson to some degree. Remember the year he got hurt, he was leading the Eagles. They went on to win the Super Bowl, but not with him because he tore his ACL. He was having an MVP season. He had like 33 touchdowns, 6 or 7 interceptions. They were talking about him winning the MVP. Then he tore his ACL, and Nick Foles stepped in. They went to Super Bowl and won it. And he's never been really the same or heard from since. So,
right.
And there's also the tie. You remember back when the Browns, the last time they had the number 2 pick in the draft, they decided to trade it for all those picks. The Eagles wanted Wentz, and they took Wentz. The Browns got all those picks, and they got some great players like Corey Coleman and Sean Coleman and a bunch of other guys that you never heard of. So,
right, exactly.
And also, Paul DeBodesta said that they didn't rank Carson Wentz as a top 20 quarterback. That's why they traded it away. I don't know how welcome he'd be even to come here unless this is his only option.
Yeah. Well, it might be a sense of desperation there at the bar at 2 a.m. with the Browns and Carson Wentz. We have got a whole bunch of questions here now. Fantastic stuff. Thank you guys for hitting us up with some questions. Let's take this one from Jeffrey. He says, if we take Carter at 2, would you be okay with taking Jalen Milroe in the second round? What's your take on that, Fred?
Well, it depends who you got to be the starter. I mean, you got to have somebody that, if you're okay to, as it stands now, to have Kenny Pickett your starting quarterback for a year or two. I'm not, I think you got to have higher aspirations than that. And again, it comes down to what Tommy Rees is saying. If he said, we got to get Milroe, he's untapped potential. I mean, right now, you got a 4-3 runner, you hear that side of the ball, and we've seen what Jackson has done over his years. He's become a competent passer when he was really more of a run first, throw second guy. I don't know, and it would be up to them. But again, I think they're in a win now situation. And if he's the only quarterback you have to play other than Kenny Pickett, then I don't know. I don't know how excited you're going to make the team or even feel like you got a legitimate chance. Because if Pickett does what he's done and gets pulled and Milroe's he's not ready. That's what the Browns have done for so long, is throw guys in. If they're clearly taking a developmental quarterback, then you got to take one that's not in play. You got to have 2 veterans. So you don't even have him on the field this year. Right. And that's by all what I've heard is Milroe is a developmental. The only ones I'm hearing that, I even feel like Jackson Dart is developmental. But he could maybe play at some point in the season. But it really comes down to, that's why it's so big in not having solved that starting quarterback spot. I mean, I liked it the year that they traded for Tyrod Taylor and he was going to be the starter, knowing you were going to draft a quarterback. They drafted Baker Mayfield, and the plan was really to have Taylor be the starter all year. We all know he got hurt in the 3rd game. And Mayfield was probably the most ready to play in the NFL of any rookie quarterback the Browns have had since they came back in 99. And the plan for him was to sit the bench. So, Sanders seems to be one that's ready to play. His ceiling might not as well as Ward, but I don't know about their other guys. So as far as Milroe, I see him more as a sit for a year at least type quarterback.
Right. I got to tell you, Fred, if they got Carter and Milroe, I would be ecstatic. Because it's all about talent. And those are 2 of the more talented players that you're going to find in the top 20 of potential draft picks. I know Milroe's not ready, but how many times, does this, we'll have the new quarterback have it take a redshirt year and sit on the bench. How many times does that work out? I mean, we mentioned like Tim Couch, right? I mean, how many games was it before Ty Detmer moved over for Tim Couch, right? Exactly, right?
And he was promised and waived his no trade clause because he was told he was going to start at least the first 8 games. And Chris Palmer yanked him after 1.
Right.
Yeah, it's impatience with the higher they're drafted, the expectations. That's the biggest thing with the number 2 pick. If you take a quarterback, they're expected to be ready to play, whether they are or not. And, at this stage of the game, if you were very confident in either Ward or Sanders to step in immediately, okay. But we don't know what they're thinking. Maybe they are the outlier. Maybe the Browns are sold that Sanders is ready and he can step in and be the starter from day one. But, then other things that they're looking, to trade down or whatever, or go completely away from quarterback would lead you to believe it's not that way. So It is. There's still, it hasn't narrowed down. We haven't really been able to determine by free agent signings. You know, if you went out and traded for a younger quarterback, then you would know they're probably not going quarterback. But I still think the path, you know, with a competent starter, it's now not Wilson. There's been many of them been signed by other teams, but or not many, but some, is via trade, you know, and figure out. I just think it takes pressure off. If you have a quarterback, I really liked what Atlanta did last year. Everybody criticized them, but they went all in, assuming they weren't going to get anybody in the draft at quarterback to get Cousins. 180 million. I mean, that's not the same type of money that Watson got, but for a guy like Kirk Cousins, it is, you know, it's like, wow, for 36-year-old quarterback. But then they turned around, the quarterback they liked was there and they took him. So you see how that's worked out. They have their young starting quarterback now, but they could have let him develop. They felt he was ready. So Browns, to this point, have not done that at quarterback, you know, unless I just don't see Kenny Pickett as the same type of quarterback that a Cousins or somebody like that is.
Yeah, Kenny Pickett is a lottery ticket, you know, right now. You know, he may hit, he may not, most likely not. We've got a couple of day 2, day 3 guys being mentioned in the chat. Jen thinks Will Howard is better than Tyler Shook. And Alec thinks that Tyler Shook is the best QB in this year's draft. Two interesting players there, Fred. Will Howard, of course, I'm wearing my Buckeyes gear here, but love me some Will Howard. But boy, oh boy, he could throw some balls up there and just have him hang up in the air. That's what I heard about his pro day. You know, and if you don't have Jeremiah Smith running under him, it's a whole different deal. You know, based on what I've been hearing about Howard. But I think he'd make a very good backup. And Tyler Shook, it's a name come out of nowhere, you know, during this draft season. You think that he might be one of those guys that teams might go a little gaga for and take earlier than you think?
It's possible. I think he's a 7-year, you know, every time I think of 7 years in college, I think of Chris Farley or one of those movies, you know, like best 7 years of my life.
Animal House, yeah.
But I don't know. I got shades of Brandon Whedon. You know, they tried to sell that to us. He's 28, but he's ready to start, you know, and you still can get 7-8 years. I'm like, yeah. Guy's 26. I don't know. I don't think this analytic group, you know, we do it on our draft boards. It's like we take guys out because the guardrails, they're always talking about the ages.
Yeah.
But they brought him in. I don't know. I mean, I'm not against them drafting 2 quarterbacks. You know, you think of the Washington that year, they took RG3 with like the 2nd pick overall, and then they took Kirk Cousins in the 4th round. You think, why in the world did you do? Well, obviously Kirk Cousins like 17-year career, but you can't count on those lower picks. I mean, I don't know what the ceiling is for Will Howard or Kyle McCord or Tyler Shock, you know, in the NFL. I think you want somebody. Statistic I read was that in the last 5 years, there's 57 quarterbacks been drafted, and only 2 of them were not in the 1st round. And generally, those were taken high in the 1st round. And those 2 that weren't in the 1st round were Jalen Hurts and Brock Purdy, you know, but they're outliers is what that's telling me. And it doesn't mean just because you take them in the 1st round, they're going to be great, but most of the starters were 1st round picks. So they got talent. I mean, some of the guys that are, you know, like we're talking the top quarterbacks this year, the top 2 or 3, we're acting like they're garbage if they're not a top 5 quarterback. Even Ward, I think, was ranked at the last one I saw with Daniel Jeremiah as the 10th best player in the draft, but he's going to get drafted first because he's a quarterback. And so that moves you way up the list, if you're the best quarterback. And if you're the second best quarterback, and you can win the NFL, and that's a big need for you. That, to me, I don't know what you're going to do, I guess, is if he's better than anybody you have, then I would take him,
Right. I don't know. Shedeur, I see really nice completion percentage, and I see a lot of sacks in his future. Fumble 13 sees holes in his drywall in his future if they don't pick Abdul Carter at number 2. He feels very strongly about it, enough that he might break his knuckles. So Fumble, definitely get yourself some core home fitness if you're planning on putting holes in walls with your fists. That will help you. But Abdul Carter at 2, Fred, would that make you happy?
If they solved the quarterback position,
Yeah, it all comes back to that.
I've been around a while, and I saw him take a defensive end from Penn State, number 1 overall, a guy named Courtney Brown, and he was a nice player. He was injured a lot, and that didn't change the franchise direction. Right. And so it's just, they got to have a plan, and it's like, okay, if you have the best defense in the NFL and you think that you'll be able to have a middling offense that scores 15 points a game, okay, get Trent Dilfer as your quarterback and see what you can do, like the Ravens did that one year. But if they have him as the best player overall, you take him.
Right.
If they have Travis Hunter, because you could solve 2 positions at the same time, you take him. And it's a circular firing squad. We can go all day. The Browns were 3-14 with Myles Garrett. I get it that that was a trade or a signing they had to do, and that's their big splash of the offseason. But that didn't improve your team. That just kept you the same. You just still had him. So you're still 3-14, and you haven't really addressed the offense at all, in my opinion.
Right.
You kind of back up. We're seeing the contracts on Lucas and Jenkins. They look kind of like backups, and a returner and a second or third string quarterback. So I keep waiting for magic, and you think you're going to address the draft, but even if you get 10 great draft picks, we all know that these guys don't come out of the chute, Pro Bowlers, It just seems like it takes time at a lot of the positions. Whatever, they've got to hit on them, especially those 5 picks in the top 104 or 4 picks, whatever it is. You got to hit on them, because that's what it looks like they're counting on is the draft.
Yeah, it's time for Andrew Berry to improve his hitting percentage when it comes to the draft. Question from Speedball Jones here. He says, do the hosts believe Sanders is a franchise quarterback? So do you see a franchise quarterback in Shedeur Sanders, Fred?
To be honest, I haven't watched enough of him. I just read a lot about it. I like his stats. 74% completion. I think it's the all-time record for college football, Division I. That's pretty impressive. No matter who you're throwing it to.
Right.
I don't, mine is more the eye test. I was more like not liking the off the field stuff. I don't like the sideways hat. I don't like the Deion Sanders, that whole persona, I'm bringing my bag. I'm bringing my own luggage, when he went to Colorado and that kind of stuff. He's not at all what I thought he was going to be honest. I didn't watch Colorado play. I assumed he was more of a mobile running quarterback, more like in the Lamar Jackson mode. but he's more of a pocket passer. And then I read that he's more suited for the Kevin Stefanski offense. So what I keep coming back to is Stefanski is the quarterback guy. If he feels this guy is the answer, you take him. If he says, he's not much different than Jackson Dart, or actually I like Jackson Dart better, or I like Jalen Milroe better, then you go that route. You don't take him at 2.
Right. Absolutely.
But I just don't want him to pass and just say, well, we thought he was, about the 10th best player in the draft, so we didn't take him at 2. And then, the Giants take him at 3, and he goes on to be a Pro Bowler and all that.
Right.
So that's why the drafts, quarterbacks is such a seems like a crapshoot, but you got your chance to draft basically anybody you want but one guy. And that's probably the guy that you want. But,
yeah, exactly. Well, I tell you what, here in Cleveland, we've seen it all, right? I mean, we've seen first-round draft picks fail. We've seen sixth-round draft picks fail. We've seen 26-year-olds fail. We've seen youngsters fail. So anytime anybody brings up anything, I think we can pull out an example, say, oh, well, that didn't work with the Browns back then. And it all has to do with, the fit and the environment and the quality of the player. As far as Sanders is concerned, I think he could be a franchise quarterback in the right situation. If he's got the right coach, if he's got the right offense, if he's got the right offensive line especially, I think he has it in him because of his accuracy percentage. But I don't know whether that franchise is Cleveland at this point with the state of our offensive line. So it does concern me a little bit when it comes to Shedeur Sanders coming into Cleveland. Kelly Black wants to know, will the Browns sign a safety before the draft? I'm a little bit surprised at the lack of activity there. They let DeAnthony Bell get away. What do you think, Fred?
Their top 5 safeties last year, 3 of them are gone. You cut Juan Thornhill and you let Bell leave, and he was their leading special teams tackler as a free agent, and you had Rodney McLeod retire. You knew he was going to retire. So you have Grant Delpit and nobody else at starter except Ronnie Hickman by default. Nothing against Ronnie Hickman, but he had a chance to be the bona fide starter. He was alternating with Thornhill last year, but he didn't really seize the moment. He had a better rookie year than he did last year. So, yeah, I am surprised, because you let Tomlinson, you cut him, but you immediately signed Collins, who looks like an upgrade over Tomlinson, and you save some money. I don't look at any free agents really left other than I think Justin Simmons and maybe Julian Blackmon that, are out there that you could bring in. It would be an upgrade over Thornhill immediately. I don't know why you're not doing that, Right. So like I said earlier, you can't address all your positions in the draft. I mean, you can take a safety, but if you take one in the 7th round, he's probably not going to be ready to go. You can, so you need to get a wide receiver. You need a tight end. You need probably more line depth young. You need almost every position. Defensive end. About the only position they probably don't need is a linebacker right now because they've added they re-signed Bush and added Baker to go with Hicks, and who knows about JOK. So I am surprised that they haven't done the safety. When I looked at Daniel Jeremiah's NFL.com, his top 50 players, I think he had 3, maybe 4 safeties. That's not a lot. So if you're going to zero in on safety, you better get them quick because they're going to be scarfed up. So they still have, they just haven't they haven't solidified this roster, in my opinion. They'll probably fill in, after the draft with some second, third, fourth wave free agents, but I guess you want a little more stability. I would like to have all your starters filled for sure before the draft, and then you're just bringing in competition or maybe somebody that could be better than what you have.
Which is where we thought we were last year. Last year we thought, wow, this roster, there's not many starting jobs left and all that. And in a year, it's changed. With the team with that many holes, Fred, so many different positions to fill, doesn't that sort of suggest a best player available strategy if you're Andrew Berry? Let's take quarterback out of the picture for a second, but because you got so many needs, why not take the highest guy on your draft board at every position other than linebacker and, maybe one or two others?
Yeah, I mean, they've always talked about that. That's where, if you have Abdul Carter, the number one player, and he's there, you take him. If they have Travis Hunter, the number one player, then you take him. But I agree with that. You said with the exception of quarterback, but it's such a big part of the equation because you could get all these guys. Let's say you get Abdul Carter and you get Trayvon Henderson and you get, Abuka or Abuka, or you know what I'm saying? At almost every position you can, Arroyo, all these guys that you could pencil right in, but you still don't have a quarterback. You're probably going to be 5-12,
Yeah. Let's go to World's Fastest Fat Man. He says, Barry, I like what we're doing with our offensive line. The two ads have put us in better shape now than we were at the start of last year. I think that's pretty accurate. The question is whether the net offensive line with those two additions is good enough to protect a guy like Shedeur Sanders who likes to move around in the pocket like he does. I don't know that, quite frankly, but I do agree with you that they've solidified their offensive line with those two additions, which has looked pretty good so far. From Drew in Brick City, what does Fred think shakes out at running back? Think we're going to draft a bell cow back, Fred?
I would like to see him. I'd like to see him even draft two. Jerome Ford, we know what he can do. He can be a good number two, maybe fill in from times. I think if you get somebody, there's about 10, 12 running backs that I would be considered as maybe not the Ashton Genty or Omarion Hampton that might be first round, but guys you could get second, third, fourth, even lower that could come in and immediately jolt, a lightning into your offense. Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, Sampson from Tennessee, Johnson from Iowa, guys like that. And then even take a second one, maybe not as big a name, but in the 5th, 6th, 7th round. So you have two young guys. I see the running back room being Jerome Ford, the rookie you draft, and Nick Chubb. I've already spelled out here, I think the logical place is for Nick Chubb to return. I think they did a qualifying offer to him, which saves him money on the salary cap. He needs 400 yards to pass Leroy Kelly. He said he wants to finish his career here. He doesn't have a big market out there. The only reason he wouldn't come back is if he just decides, well, I'm for spite. And I don't think that's him. If he becomes closer to the Nick Chubb we all know, they'll have a dynamic running back room. If not, he would be like last year, a third down or a short yardage, the third back. And that's where the second guy you draft could come into play, and he could actually push, for playing time. And then you move on from Chubb after this year, but you have two rookies for the future, one with big play ability. It just seems to be win-win. You would hate to see Nick Chubb go to some other team, Pittsburgh or somewhere, Denver, on a minimum deal, and he gets back to the old Nick Chubb, and he does the Derrick Henry or the Saquon Barkley, and you're going, what in the world? Why in the world did we let the guy go? Most people in medical field with his type of injury say they're much better in the second year. Why take that chance? If he's your third back, and you've got the Pierre Strongs and those type guys, but if he is close to what he used to be, then you're going to have a dynamic room for this year, but also one or two guys for the future that are better than Jerome Ford, at least one of them.
Yep. Well, we have hit 8 o'clock. I want to get this question in, or this comment from Jeffrey Champion. And he says, I don't care if Joe Flacco is 40 years old. I'm good. I'd rather see Kenny Pickett because at least he has upside. We've seen the best of Joe Flacco. He's not getting any better. And let me tick off about 40% of the chat room by saying, I agree with you, Jeffrey. I don't want a replay of the Joe Flacco, situation. He was up and down last year. We saw the up and down, the down at Houston. I just don't think he's going to come in and at his age run a whole season and run this team to the playoffs. It was a great run a couple of years ago. It was magical. It was wonderful. I just don't think he can go back to that particular well. I'd rather see some younger guys. I'd even rather see Carson Wentz, to be honest with you. Fred, if I ticked you off along with part of the chat room?
Well, you didn't tick me off because it's like, but yeah, that was some of the funnest football I've covered. It was like you said, magical. It was like you're sitting there, I can't believe what I'm watching.
Mm-hmm.
But again, is that the Kevin Stefanski effect? In that system, they're going back to that with the offensive line. The offensive linemen were all giddy. I think that's why Joe Bitonio, other than the $16 million, decided to come back, because this zone read, they know where the quarterback in the pocket's going to be instead of the guy running all over the place. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm going to have to be proven, or I'm going to have to, be shown that Kenny Pickett's a good quarterback. I mean, if he hadn't been with the Steelers and we made fun of him for 2 years, you hope that he stayed as their quarterback forever because they'd never win. And now he's your quarterback. It doesn't make you feel that good.
Boy, the things that we have talked ourselves into as Cleveland Browns fans and media over the years, astounding. The things that we've talked ourselves into. Now I'm just taking abuse now. Sorry about that, guys. I'm not big on Flacco, but at any rate, we have hit the 8 o'clock hour. I want to thank Core Home Fitness. I want to thank everybody in the chat room. That was awesome, guys. Thank you so much for that. Of course, most of all, I want to thank that guy, the legend, Mr. Freddie Greetham, for being here and giving us his knowledge. And so we'll see you again next Wednesday at 8 o'clock here on OBR Weekly. Good night, everybody.
See you next week, inside a month of the draft.
Yep. Let's go. Dak Prescott.